Did you know that for many Scorpios, life doesn't really begin until after 40? Yes. It sounds surprising. But it's true. What if I told you, everything you think you know about Scorpio might only be the surface of a much deeper story? You see, Scorpio is famous for passion, mystery, and emotional depth. People often see them as intense, private, maybe even a little dangerous. But here's what most people miss: all that power? All that magnetic energy? It's not fully awakened until midlife. At 40, something shifts inside a Scorpio. Something powerful. This is not just getting older. It's a transformation. A rebirth. Imagine a lifetime of struggles, heartbreak, deep emotions hidden beneath the surface. At 40, Scorpio stops running from themselves and starts becoming who they were always meant to be. In today's video, we're going to explore why the age of 40 marks the true beginning of a Scorpio's life. I'll share insights that blend astrology, psychology, and real-life experience. You'll learn how Scorpio's shadows become their strength, and how their emotions become a source of wisdom, not weakness. If you're a Scorpio, or you have one in your life, this is a story you need to hear. So, make yourself comfortable. Hit the like button if you're ready to dive deep. Don't forget to subscribe for more content about astrology, psychology, and personal growth. Now, let's begin this journey together. There's something powerful that happens inside a Scorpio when they reach their 40s. It's not something you can see from the outside. It's something they feel deep within. For years, maybe decades, they've carried their intensity like a heavy weight. A double-edged sword. People around them might have said, "You're too much. Why are you always so serious? Why can't you just relax?" And maybe Scorpio tried. Maybe they hid their emotions, buried their intensity. Tried to play small just to fit in. But it never worked. Because that depth, that passion, that mysterious force inside them, it doesn't go away. It waits. And at 40, it finally wakes up. This is the age when Scorpio begins to understand the greatest paradox of their life, that what once felt like a weakness was actually their hidden power. But here's the secret. This transformation doesn't come from gaining something new. It comes from unlearning. From letting go of the false belief that emotions should be controlled, or hidden, or feared. Scorpio starts realizing that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the gateway to connection, to intimacy, to truth. Think about it. For much of their earlier life, Scorpio may have believed that showing their true emotions meant giving away their power. Maybe they feared being judged. Or worse, betrayed. So they stayed guarded. Built walls. Smiled when they didn't want to. Stayed silent when their heart was screaming. But at 40, the walls start to crumble. And for the first time, it feels right. They begin to share their feelings. Carefully, at first. A few trusted people. A quiet moment over coffee. A late-night conversation where the mask slips. Just a little. And in those moments, they learn something life-changing. People don't walk away. People lean in. The very thing they thought would push others away becomes the reason people feel safe around them. Vulnerability transforms from a hidden fear into a conscious strength. It's like a Scorpio learning to breathe underwater after years of holding their breath. They realize that emotions won't drown them. Instead, those emotions carry them forward, connecting them to others in ways they never imagined. And it goes deeper. As Scorpio embraces vulnerability, they're also forced to face something they've long avoided: the wounds of their past. Old memories start to surface. Childhood hurts. Past betrayals. Times when they felt abandoned or rejected. And at 40, something shifts. Instead of pushing those memories away, they begin to lean into them. Not to wallow. Not to relive the pain. But to heal. Scorpio starts understanding that those wounds shaped their protective walls. The silence. The self-protection. But now, healing that inner child becomes not just necessary, but liberating. It might be through therapy, meditation, journaling, or simply sitting alone in the quiet and letting the memories come. But in those moments, Scorpio sees the truth: they're not broken. They've never been. They were just carrying a story that said otherwise. Healing the inner child gives Scorpio something priceless: emotional freedom. They stop blaming themselves for past hurts. They stop believing they're too complicated, or too emotional, or too intense. And they begin to write a new story. But the journey doesn't stop there. With healing comes clarity. Scorpio's famous shadows, the fears, the doubts, the moments of emotional chaos, start to become visible. Before 40, these shadows ruled from the background. Subconscious patterns repeating again and again. Failed relationships. Missed chances. Emotional explosions they couldn't explain. But now, they see. They understand. Shadow work isn't just a trend for Scorpio. It's survival. It's the key to freedom. And at 40, they're finally ready. They look at their shadows not with fear, but with compassion. Why? Because they know those shadows aren't their enemy. They're the parts of themselves that tried to protect them. The anger was protection. The silence was protection. Even the jealousy was protection. Scorpio starts talking to their shadows like old friends. Listening. Understanding. And then, integrating. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Scorpio learns to say, yes, I have darkness. But that darkness is part of my light. And when this happens, something incredible is unlocked. Scorpio's intensity, the very thing that once overwhelmed them, becomes their tool for transformation. Not just for themselves, but for others. Think about the people you've met who can look you in the eyes and really see you. Who aren't afraid of your pain. Who listen without judgment, because they've already sat in their own shadows. Chances are, you've met a Scorpio like that. And at 40, more Scorpios step into that role. They stop hiding from their intensity. They use it to help others heal. To guide. To connect. Scorpio understands that their depth is their strength. Their emotions are not a problem to solve. They're a gift to share. They start to realize that every struggle, every heartbreak, every tear, has prepared them for this moment of awakening. This moment of transformation. And it's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming who they were always meant to be. At 40, Scorpio no longer tries to dim their light to make others comfortable. They no longer apologize for feeling deeply, loving fiercely, or thinking differently. They own it. They embrace it. And in doing so, they finally feel free. Because freedom, for Scorpio, doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from accepting themselves. Every emotion. Every shadow. Every piece of their complex, beautiful soul. And that is where their real journey begins. There's a moment, somewhere in the quiet of their 40s, when Scorpio realizes something unexpected. Forgiveness isn't something they give to others. It's something they give to themselves. For so long, holding on to anger felt like control. Holding grudges seemed like strength. It felt safer to keep the wound open than to risk trusting someone again. But the truth is, those old resentments were never protecting Scorpio. They were only building walls that kept happiness out. At 40, something shifts. Scorpio starts to understand that letting go is not weakness. It's an act of deep self-love. They don't forgive because the other person deserves it. They forgive because they deserve peace. And it's not easy. Forgiveness doesn't happen in a moment. It comes in waves. One morning, waking up and realizing that the pain isn't as sharp as before. One conversation where the old anger doesn't rise as fast. Scorpio starts releasing, piece by piece. Not for the world, but for their own freedom. And in that freedom, something powerful awakens. Their intuition sharpens. It's no longer just a gut feeling. It becomes their most trusted guide. Imagine standing at a crossroads in life. One path looks logical. The other feels right. Before 40, Scorpio might have hesitated, questioned themselves, ignored that quiet inner voice. But now, they listen. They've learned, often through painful experience, that their intuition was right all along. That feeling in their chest. That tightness in their stomach. Those sudden insights that make no sense on paper but feel true in the soul. Scorpio stops doubting. They trust. This intuition doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. Decisions become simpler. Not because the options are obvious, but because Scorpio finally trusts their internal compass. They start saying no to things that don't resonate. They walk away from relationships that drain them. They choose the job that feels aligned, not the one that looks impressive. And people around them notice. They might say, "How do you always know what to do?" But Scorpio smiles quietly, knowing the answer. They just stopped fighting themselves. Yet alongside this deepening intuition, Scorpio learns something even bigger. A lesson that changes everything. Control is an illusion. For much of their life, Scorpio tried to control it all. Their emotions, their relationships, outcomes, the future. Not because they're power-hungry, but because chaos terrified them. Being out of control felt like being unsafe. So they planned, they controlled, they managed every detail. But life doesn't work that way. At 40, Scorpio begins to surrender. Not out of defeat, but out of wisdom. They realize that trying to control everything only drains their energy and steals their peace. Some things are meant to unfold. Some answers are meant to arrive slowly. Instead of fighting the current, Scorpio learns to flow with it. It's like standing in a river. Before, they struggled against the water, exhausting themselves, afraid of where it might carry them. But now, they let go. Not completely. Not carelessly. But wisely. They choose their battles. They focus where their energy matters. And they release the rest. This doesn't make Scorpio passive. It makes them powerful. Because real power comes from knowing when to act, and when to let life take its course. And in this new mindset, Scorpio discovers something they never expected. Saying no becomes easy. In their younger years, saying no felt uncomfortable. They didn't want to hurt people. They feared losing connections. So they said yes when they meant no. They took on responsibilities that drained them. They tolerated situations that chipped away at their soul. But at 40, Scorpio learns the magic of boundaries. Saying no is no longer seen as rejection. It's protection. It's clarity. It's self-respect. They learn to say no to people who don't honor their time. To projects that don't align with their values. To conversations that drain their spirit. And when they say no, something beautiful happens. They make space for what truly matters. Friends respect them more. Partners listen more closely. Their energy begins to return. Because now, Scorpio protects their power instead of giving it away. This boundary setting isn't harsh. It's calm. It's clear. It's healthy. Imagine a Scorpio standing tall, not with walls around their heart, but with clear lines drawn in the sand. Lines that say, "This is where I end, and you begin." And people respect those lines. Because when you respect yourself, others will too. All these changes might seem small from the outside. A quiet no. A decision made from intuition. A moment of letting go instead of fighting. But inside Scorpio's soul, it's a revolution. Each shift is a step closer to freedom. To authenticity. To peace. And yet, the journey is far from over. What comes next might be the most transformative part of all. Because in the next chapter of Scorpio's awakening, we'll explore how their sensuality, resilience, and deepest truths unfold. And the final 3 lessons? They may just challenge everything you thought you knew about Scorpio's power. Stay with me. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Something beautiful begins to awaken inside Scorpio when they reach this stage of life. After years of searching outside themselves for passion and purpose, they suddenly feel it spark from within. Often, it's unexpected. A new hobby. A creative project. A fresh interest that lights up their soul in a way nothing else did before. At first, it feels unfamiliar. Maybe even confusing. Why now? Why this? But soon, they realize their inner fire isn't gone. It was just waiting to be reignited. At 40, Scorpio rediscovers joy. Not the fleeting kind that comes from achievements or praise, but the quiet, lasting joy that comes from doing something simply because it feels right. Whether it's painting late at night, learning to play music, writing, or starting a new career, Scorpio learns to follow where their soul leads. And in those moments, time disappears. Worries fade. And for the first time in years, they feel alive. This rediscovery isn't about starting over. It's about returning home to themselves. It's about honoring their deepest desires, not the expectations others placed upon them. That's why this stage is so powerful. Scorpio stops asking, "What should I do?" and starts asking, "What makes me feel alive?" And something else shifts alongside this inner fire. Scorpio's relationship with confidence transforms. In their 20s, they might have sought approval, looked for validation, compared themselves to others, worried about fitting in. But now, that need fades away. Scorpio realizes they no longer need the world's permission to feel strong. Their confidence doesn't come from praise. It comes from within. Imagine walking into a room and not caring who notices. Not because you feel small, but because you finally feel whole. That's the power of Scorpio's self-confidence at this stage. They stand taller, speak clearer, move through life without the heavy burden of needing others to tell them they're enough. They already know it. This quiet confidence affects every part of their life. They choose partners based on connection, not validation. They make career decisions based on passion, not fear. They stop explaining themselves to people who will never understand. Scorpio finally accepts that they are who they are. Complex, intense, beautifully unique. And that acceptance feels like freedom. But there's a deeper transformation happening too. One that most people don't see. At 40, Scorpio faces their own shadows in a new way. Not with resistance. Not with shame. But with honesty. They begin to understand that denying their darker sides only makes them heavier. So they stop fighting. And start accepting. All the anger. All the jealousy. The fear. The parts they once hated. They look at them now and say, "You're part of me." And in that moment of acceptance, those shadows lose their power. Scorpio no longer needs to pretend. They no longer hide parts of themselves. Because what they've learned is simple. Wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration. And when Scorpio integrates their shadows, something magical happens. They become emotionally lighter, freer, more authentic. People around them feel it too. Conversations go deeper. Connections feel safer. Because Scorpio is no longer performing. They're simply being. They show up in relationships as their full, honest self. And that honesty becomes magnetic. People sense when someone has made peace with who they are. It's calming. It's grounding. It's inspiring. Scorpio doesn't need to prove anything. They're already whole. And that wholeness opens the door to something else. Something Scorpio always longed for but rarely found. True intimacy. Because now, their sensuality and emotional depth are no longer hidden weapons. They become gifts. At 40, Scorpio discovers that physical connection means little without emotional depth. And now, they have both. They express their desires without shame. They communicate their needs without fear. And in doing so, they build relationships that are not only passionate, but healing. Whether they're with a longtime partner or opening up to someone new, Scorpio now understands how to love without losing themselves. They don't hold back. But they don't overgive either. They meet people at the middle ground, where honesty and vulnerability create the deepest bonds. In intimacy, Scorpio stops chasing control. They choose connection instead. They're not afraid to be seen fully. Every scar. Every shadow. Every desire. And in that openness, they find something they never expected. Safety. Because real intimacy isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And now, Scorpio knows how to be real. This is why life after 40 feels like a new chapter for Scorpio. Their passions reignite. Their confidence grows from within. Their shadows become their allies. And their relationships become deeper than they've ever known. But the journey isn't finished yet. Because what comes next will take Scorpio's transformation to an entirely new level. In the next chapter, we'll uncover how resilience, change, and natural magnetism become the keys to Scorpio's most profound personal power. And in the final 3 revelations, you'll discover the truths that may challenge everything you believed about what makes a Scorpio truly unstoppable. Stay with me. The most powerful lessons are still ahead. There's a strength Scorpio builds over time. It's not the loud, obvious kind. It's quiet. Steady. It's resilience. But here's the truth. They didn't always have it. In their younger years, every crisis felt like the end of the world. Every betrayal felt final. Every failure felt personal. Scorpio's depth often worked against them. They felt things too intensely. They hurt too deeply. But life, in its harsh and patient way, taught them otherwise. By 40, Scorpio stops seeing crises as punishments. They begin to see them as lessons. They no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, they ask, "What is this here to teach me?" That simple shift changes everything. They no longer fear failure. They don't run from heartbreak. They understand that pain isn't permanent. Every wound eventually heals. And every struggle carries a hidden gift. So, when life knocks them down now, they don't stay down. They breathe. They process. They rise. That's resilience. And Scorpio, at this stage of life, masters it. Not because life gets easier, but because they get stronger. They've seen themselves survive the unimaginable. And that memory becomes their anchor. So, when the next storm comes, they meet it differently. With wisdom. With calm. With the quiet confidence that says, "I've been here before. I know how to survive." And something even more surprising happens. Scorpio stops fearing change. It's strange, really. After years of resisting every shift, they now lean into it. In their youth, change felt like losing control. It felt unsafe. It triggered anxiety, even panic. But at 40, Scorpio learns that change is not the enemy. Stagnation is. They begin to welcome change as a sign of growth. A new job, a different city, the end of a relationship, none of it feels like failure anymore. It feels like movement. Like life showing them the next step. Scorpio starts asking themselves, what can this change teach me? Instead of clinging to the past, they step forward, even when the path feels unclear. They trust that every ending hides a beginning. And here's the truth. Change becomes exciting. Not easy, but exciting. It's a doorway. And Scorpio finally has the courage to walk through it. They stop being the phoenix trapped in ashes. They become the phoenix rising. Again and again. Not because they have to, but because they choose to. This shift in perspective brings them to a new discovery. Their natural magnetism. Scorpio has always attracted people. That part never changed. But after 40, their energy shifts. Their presence becomes different. People don't just feel drawn to them because of mystery or intensity anymore. They feel drawn to something deeper. Authenticity. When Scorpio stops pretending, stops hiding, stops controlling every interaction, people feel it. They feel the quiet confidence, the realness, the peace. And that authenticity is magnetic. Opportunities come more naturally. New friendships feel effortless. Professional connections start to align with Scorpio's true values. It's not about trying to charm anyone. It's about being so real, so grounded in who they are, that others feel safe around them. Think of the people in your life who walk into a room and, without saying much, change the energy. You feel their strength, their calm. That's Scorpio after 40. They no longer attract people from the surface. They attract from the soul. And here's what's beautiful. Scorpio stops chasing connections that don't fit. They stop forcing relationships that don't serve them. Instead, they let life bring the right people at the right time. They trust their own energy to do the work. And it does. But there's one more shift. Perhaps the most personal of all. Scorpio stops valuing quantity. In every part of their life, they choose quality instead. In their younger years, they might have collected friendships like trophies, rushed into connections, said yes to every opportunity, every event, every conversation. Not anymore. Now, Scorpio values depth over numbers. They'd rather have 2 real friends than 20 acquaintances. They'd rather work with a small, loyal team than a large, scattered group. Their time becomes sacred. Their energy, even more so. And this isn't about becoming cold. It's about being selective. It's about protecting peace. Every relationship becomes intentional. Every conversation meaningful. Scorpio realizes that emotional energy is like currency. And now, they spend it wisely. This change isn't always easy. It can feel lonely at times. But Scorpio knows that loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of connection. So, they choose connection. Real. Honest. Deep. And in doing so, they build a life that feels solid. Grounded. Peaceful. Everything in their life, friendships, work, love, becomes simpler. Not because life itself simplifies, but because Scorpio learns to simplify their focus. They stop trying to please everyone. They stop saying yes to everything. They stop diluting their energy. Instead, they pour themselves into what matters. And here's the quiet truth. They've never felt more powerful. But what's coming next is something different. Something deeper. Because the final 3 lessons reveal the parts of Scorpio's transformation that most people never see. Lessons about strategy, solitude, and vulnerability. Lessons that might just challenge what you believe about strength. Stay with me. What comes next may be the most personal, and most powerful chapter of this entire journey. At some point in their 40s, Scorpio stops being afraid of spending time alone. Solitude, which once felt like isolation, now becomes a kind of sanctuary. They no longer see being alone as something to escape. Instead, it becomes a space to heal, to think, and to reconnect with who they really are. Imagine quiet mornings with a coffee in hand, just listening to their own thoughts. No noise. No distractions. In those silent moments, Scorpio finds answers. They start to understand themselves in a way they never could before. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's clarity. It's peace. It's the space where they stop performing for the world and simply exist as themselves. And something interesting happens. The more comfortable they become with solitude, the deeper their self-awareness grows. They recognize old patterns. They hear their intuition louder. They see their needs more clearly. Time alone no longer drains them. It recharges them. It's in these quiet moments that Scorpio makes their most important decisions. Not rushed. Not influenced. But grounded, honest choices. They choose their next path, their next relationship. Their next move, not from fear, but from deep personal wisdom. Solitude becomes their teacher. Their safe place. Their mirror. And they carry that inner strength into every part of life. And then, perhaps the most unexpected lesson of all arrives. Scorpio finally learns how to show their vulnerability without losing their strength. For years, vulnerability felt dangerous. Showing emotion meant opening a door to being hurt. So they stayed guarded. Silent. Detached. But maturity teaches them something different. Being vulnerable doesn't mean losing control. It means choosing connection over fear. Scorpio begins to share their emotions more openly. Not recklessly, but honestly. They admit when they're scared. They say when they're hurt. They express when they're unsure. And here's what's powerful, they do it without apologizing. Because they now understand that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's bravery. It's the courage to be real. Even when it feels uncomfortable. And when they open up, they discover something beautiful. People don't judge them. People connect with them. This balance between openness and strength becomes Scorpio's quiet superpower. They stop hiding behind intensity. They stop masking pain with silence. They let people see their heart and trust that the right people will respect it. Through vulnerability, Scorpio builds deeper relationships. They create trust. They inspire others to open up too. And within themselves, they feel lighter. Freer. Stronger. Not in the way they once thought strength looked, but in the way that only comes from embracing their full, authentic self. It's in this place of honesty that Scorpio's life truly begins. Because now, they're no longer pretending. They're no longer performing. They're simply being. And that is their real power. Scorpio's story is not about learning to control life. It's about learning to trust life. To trust their emotions. Their intuition. Their choices. And above all, themselves. At 40, Scorpio doesn't just evolve. They rise. From the ashes of their past. From the silence of their solitude. From the honesty of their vulnerability. They become someone new. And yet, more themselves than ever before. So if you're listening to this, maybe you're a Scorpio. Or maybe you love one. Either way, I hope you understand now that life doesn't end at 40. For Scorpio, it begins. And perhaps, no matter your zodiac sign, there's a part of their journey that speaks to yours. Because in the end, we're all trying to do the same thing. Heal. Grow. And learn how to be fully, unapologetically ourselves. If this message touched something in you, consider subscribing to the channel. Maybe share this video with someone you care about. Someone who needs to hear that their next chapter could be their best. And if you're ready for more, trust me, we've only just begun. There are many more stories to tell. Many more lessons to explore. And I'll be right here, waiting to share them with you. Until next time, take care of your heart. And keep becoming who you were always meant to be.